So I want to hit this video from a few angles here, because there's a lot of different ways we can go. So let's just say that Dooku defeated Anakin in Revenge of the Sith. Obviously, Anakin was a lot more powerful by that point, but let's just say Anakin was just too reckless and maybe just didn't act quickly enough, or Dooku just saw an opening and took advantage of Anakin's aggressiveness. And let's just say Dooku managed to kill Anakin Skywalker as well as Obi-Wan Kenobi. So obviously, this does sort of throw a wrench in Darth Sidious's plan, but of course, Darth Sidious is going to have a very hard time finding a new apprentice now, so he would probably stick to Darth Tyrannus Dooku at this point. And then now what would happen is, with both Skywalker and Kenobi dead, I think Sidious would just have to move forward with his plan. So Sidious would go ahead and execute Order 66, and then him, Darth Tyrannus Dooku, and General Grievous would all march into the Jedi Temple and wipe the place out together. Of course, there's a few possibilities we have to consider here. So perhaps, obviously, Yoda and Mace Windu would probably be powerful enough to handle Sidious and Tyrannus. So maybe Yoda and Mace Windu emerge victorious and Sidious and Tyrannus are defeated. But on the other side, perhaps Sidious is just stronger than both Yoda and Mace Windu, and they manage to totally overwhelm them. And it's also conceivable that Dooku would know well enough that he needs to find Jocasta Nu, and he might just find and deal with Jocasta Nu first, so that she can't escape and take Jedi secrets with her. So I guess there could be a few different ways that siege could play out, but let's say that the Sith are completely successful and they manage to sack the Jedi Temple. And of course, across the galaxy, the clones are destroying all the Jedi. And I think if Padme learned about Anakin's demise, she would probably do what she did in the original timeline. And by that, I mean she would lose the will to live and just die. And I think the children, Luke and Leia, inside of her would probably also just die with her. So I could write them out of the plot like that. So, okay. Now, obviously, at this point, they're still pretty early on in the Siege of Mandalore over in Mandalore, and the clones would turn on Ahsoka and Bo-Katan, and chaos would erupt. So, I think, obviously, Maul would be able to see what's going on very quickly, and he would make the connection. So, I think Maul would heavily adjust his plan, and so maybe Maul and Gar Saxon, Rook Cast, and Almec, and everyone just escapes. Or what they might do is maybe there's enough chaos caused so that Maul, Saxon, Cast, and Almec can just wipe out Bo-Katan and Ahsoka and all the clones at the same time and keep control on Mandalore. And then I think in this scenario, Maul would prepare all of his criminals and his entire empire, all the neutral worlds and all the Mandalorians, and basically launch an all-out war. And he'd probably subjugate the Hutts too before doing that. Now, the reason I say this is because, remember, Maul's original plan for the Siege of Mandalore was to just draw Anakin there and eliminate him so that Sidious wouldn't have Anakin. But in this timeline, Dooku has managed to defeat Anakin, and Maul knows that Dooku is very weak and was not supposed to be Sidious's long-term apprentice. So I think Maul would capitalize on this new vulnerability of Sidious. But okay, let's just say. But let's put that possibility aside for a moment and focus on Sidious and Tyrannus ruling the galaxy. So let's just say they win everything and rule the galaxy. So I think as I said before, Dooku might have dealt with Jocasta Nu, or he might not have. And so if Jocasta Nu escapes like she did in the original timeline, and we have the situation where she's a survivor of the Purge, I think Sidious would have Dooku specifically track her down, and I think he might actually be successful in bringing her to Darth Sidious. And or it's possible that Dooku and Jocasta Nu would team up and work against Sidious, and Dooku would realize that having Jocasta Nu on his side might help him out a little bit, and then they would try to overthrow Sidious together. Maybe she would turn to the dark side, or he would turn to the light side. Who knows? And obviously, Sidious could prevail in this case, and he most likely would. But let's just say he lost, then Dooku and Jocasta Nu would just rule the galaxy. But if Sidious did prevail, then he would just have no apprentice, and he would just have to find one. Okay, but wiping all of that aside, let's backtrack a little bit. It's a little unorganized here, but there's just so many open-ended possibilities that we could use. So let's just say that Sidious does succeed in putting down Dooku and Jocasta Nu, but then in this case, now Maul launches an all-out war with his criminals and gangsters and neutral worlds and all of that, and that damages the Empire significantly. And the Rebel Alliance decides to, in this case, team up with Maul, and that is also a massive blow. And the criminals on Coruscant also decide to join Maul, which is also really bad. So, yeah, this could be a total mess. But okay, it's also possible, like, let's say Dooku and Jocasta Nu join forces. Maybe then Dooku would use some of his power to get the Separatists to be on his side, which is possible since he does have a lot of influence, even though Sidious is a real power. So there's that strange possibility. But moving forward, a few things I want to discuss. So let's just say everything happens normally and there's no crazy situation. And let's assume that Dooku remains as Sidious's apprentice for a few years, which after the events of, after all that, after Sidious wins, he would be very eager to replace Dooku, and he would look for someone very quickly. So I don't envision a scenario, even if Dooku had survived his encounter with Anakin and, let's say, defeated Anakin, I still don't envision a scenario where Dooku would have lasted very long. Now, I think Sidious might use Dooku as a useful tool for a moment, so he could use Dooku to hunt down a lot of Jedi, and Dooku would be pretty successful in doing that. And he could use Dooku to train the Inquisitors, which Dooku would be very successful in doing as well. Now, there's a few caveats to this. I do think that just like Vader, Dooku would be much stronger than all the Inquisitors, but he is older, so eventually they could outlive him, which is also a problem. Additionally, it's possible that since Dooku is so old, and if he's fighting like a young Jedi survivor, then Dooku might be the one in trouble in that case. Like, imagine if Dooku ran into like Quinlan Vos again. I mean, Quinlan Vos literally almost beat him in Dark Disciple. So if Dooku ran into him again, I think Dooku would be the favorite. I think that Vos would be the favorite to win that fight. Now, yeah, I just can't. I guess I could imagine Dooku handling the situations like Vader did. I suppose I could, but just to make my point clear, though, obviously Sidious never intended on keeping Dooku, and I think he always had a plan to get rid of him somehow, whether it was by Anakin or not. And a few reasons for that. Sidious does mention that Darth Maul was a loss, but Dooku was just a proton torpedo who fulfilled his purposes and was gone. And he also mentions that he values Vader, obviously. So the point here is there's a few reasons why Sidious considers Dooku to be of less worth, and I think one of them is that Dooku, Maul, and Vader fear Sidious, but they're not afraid of him. They fear him because they understand the power that he has, but they're not afraid to rebel against him or plot against him or try to do something against him. And I think Sidious likes that because that's the way of the dark side. On the other hand, Dooku, while he has grand ambitions, he also fears Sidious, but the difference is that he is actually afraid of Sidious, which, okay, I guess Maul and Vader are too, but like there's a difference in the way that Dooku's afraid of Sidious versus the way that Maul and Vader are afraid of Sidious. In that Dooku never tries to do an insurrection against Sidious. I mean, I guess he sort of implies that he wants to in Dark Disciple and when he's trading Savage Press, but that's another story. But I don't. I think Dooku is lacking in his ambitions, which is a big turnoff to Sidious. And the second part is obviously the plot, because it was always going to be Vader because the original trilogy came before the prequel trilogy, so they did have to get rid of Dooku somehow. And third reason is Dooku seems to be well, actually, never mind. No, I think Dooku's plenty ruthless and plenty competent. But a final reason that Sidious probably didn't want to keep Dooku around for long is the fact that Dooku is literally like 20 years older than Sidious. So, okay, if your apprentice is 20 years older than you, then he's gonna not last as long as you. So that's not promising. And Dooku wanted a younger, strong apprentice, a young, strong apprentice in the form of Darth Vader, obviously. And Dooku is a super old man, older than Sidious himself, so probably not the best guy to keep around. And plus, like I said, that would become a liability over the years. Like, imagine Dooku fighting the Jedi survivors, imagine him fighting the rebels, imagine him fighting off the enemies of the Empire, like having an 80 man in his 80s, 90s, and over 100, like having that guy fight off the enemies of the Empire. I think that would be somewhat of a very big liability that Sidious just didn't want to take. And of course, like, let's say that Dooku had been alive at the time of Star Wars Rebels. Well, you know how old he would be then, because it's Star Wars Rebels is 17. Actually, he starts 15 years after Revenge of the Sith for season 1. So in Star Wars Rebels season 1, Dooku would be 98 years old. So 98-year-old Dooku fighting a young Kanan, Jarrus, and Ezra. And I'm sure he'd still be stronger than them, and he would probably beat them, but his age might be a disadvantage. And okay, Dooku would be like 102 by the time of A New Hope, which is fairly significant. 102-year-old Dooku. Can you imagine that? 102-year-old Dooku storming Tantive 4 and just fighting off the rebels, and it would be a little much. And I'm not sure that Dooku would have even been alive at the time of the original trilogy. So yeah, that's another reason that Sidious probably didn't want to keep Dooku around for too long. So those are my takeaways on Count Dooku and what might have happened had he not died in that scene in Revenge of the Sith. It's quite something to think about. I don't think I missed anything. Let's just see. Yeah, I just went over the scenarios on what Dooku might have done or what might have happened or who knows what. And then I just talked about some reasons why maybe Sidious didn't want to keep Dooku around. So, okay. I think that's it for this video. Subscribe, share, and view the videos. There's quite a lot of them, and they're really great. So you'll enjoy this channel a great deal.